I've got a quick one for you today, but also it goes on forever. I want to talk about painting repeating patterns as I show you what I painted last week. This week when I started, there had actually been a few days of a gap, like let's see, yeah, I finished off on June 19th with this ship that I showed you, and then I didn't paint again until June 23rd. And sometimes when there's a gap, it can feel a little bit bigger to get back into it. Suddenly I feel more confused about what to paint, how to start, what I like, all of that stuff. And I also have found that since beginning these videos that I'm sharing here, it's kind of gotten into my head a little bit, and sometimes when I sit down to paint, I start considering what you would want to see or what I showed before, or am I showing too many of the same things in a row, which essentially means that I'm painting for you and not painting for me. And listen, you seem great. You seem really lovely, and you deserve to be painted for. But I also deserve to have a space in my sketchbook where it can just be what I need, I guess. And so I often revert back to flowers. They're kind of a comfort zone for me. And these aren't spectacular. There's nothing terribly special about them, but they are what I needed to get back into my sketchbook. And so in that way, they're very special. It's so important to find what your doorways are back into your sketchbook, even if it's, the same color or the same motif or whatever it is. Whatever gets you picking that paintbrush back up is worth it. One thing I want to mention about the process is, do you see how you can see some yellow ochre poking out between those leaves? Well, what I had done was I painted the first layer of foliage in that yellow ochre color, and with hopes that when I painted the green on top, some of that yellow would poke through and kind of add almost an effect of light, or just, some visual interest as your eyes moved around. And I really like it. I wish I had left some of the leaves completely ochre. Like I wish I would have, scattered some in there just to kind of break it up, but I can always do that in the future. I also realized that maybe this is a very, a classic way for me to render a flower is to have kind of a base shape and then to just carve out the lines or the shapes with line work on top. And it has served me for a long time, but seeing this, like painting this flower in particular, really made me curious to branch out and really start thinking of other ways that I can paint flowers that are still graphic, still easy to take in and simplified, but maybe not so contrasted with this harsh, dark value on top of the lighter value. So it gave me something to think about, even though it's something kind of simple. Okay, but here's the main thing I wanted to discuss. I was working out a repeating pattern, and I wanted to break, like very similar to what I was talking about here. I really wanted to branch out into new types of shapes. I have this pillow that sits on my bed that my husband got me from World Market, and I just love that all of the shapes read as flowers, and yet they're really strange. Like when I'm looking at them, I'm like, how did the artist think to render this? How did they think to add this other shape here? And so I tried to push myself here by painting things that started off as flower shapes and then added, had some other shapes added on, or an additional growth, an additional leaf. This flower here was originally just this flower. And then I had some space, so I just added another leaf on top of him. I added a whole other kind of set of flowers on there. And it was a really fun exercise. But this, as you can see, a repeating pattern. When you make a tile, whatever falls off one edge then gets picked up on the other edge. And I think you can see that this, although it looks like a pattern, is not actually. This flower where it falls off the bottom is not continued up here. This was just a way for me to explore these shapes, and then to actually do the repeat. I started by practicing on these 4-inch squares of paper. And so you can see that as things fall off the edge, they are repeated on the other edge. And this is so fun to paint this way. It's kind of a mind bender. It's one of those things that seems like it shouldn't work, and yet it does. And I did a smaller one on these test ones just to see if it would work. And then that led to painting these on these 8-inch squares. You can see that I used those shapes that I had painted in my sketchbook. All of that practice really helped me figure out what the actual shapes would look like. And then the two squares, painting carefully on these two squares allowed me to paint over those seams in order to make a tile that repeats all the way. Now, for people who are, more confident painters than I am, they may have then been able to paint on top of this, paint additional layers to actually render these flowers and have, finish the repeat as a totally painted piece. I wasn't feeling so confident. So I actually took these, I scanned them in and brought them over to my iPad. Her name is Maud, so that I could draw on top of them in a program called Adobe Fresco. And this just gave me, a playground to experiment with how am I going to render these flowers? If I'm not going to do the classic Dylan style of basic line work, what am I going to build on top of it? How much colors are they going to have? And it took a long time, but I really enjoyed the results. And part of the benefits of painting the repeat ahead of time, even though this isn't completed, what is completed by this process is making the repeat. By the time I scanned these into Photoshop, the puzzle of how all these pieces are going to fit together was already done. I just had to decide how they were going to look, how each flower was going to express itself. I encourage you to give this a try, even if you aren't going to scan it in and turn it into an actual repeat. I found that just the exercise of painting in this way was really fun. It changed my focus, and I got a piece out of it that I really, really love. And that is what I painted last week.